This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice or be a substitute for therapy. Please contact a mental health professional as needed. If you are needing urgent or emergency health care, contact your mental health provider, call 911, or go to your nearest emergency room. The information presented in this podcast also does not reflect the opinions of those with whom we may be affiliated, both past and present.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of I Wish I Had the Balls. And I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Dr. Laura Ellick. Good morning.
Good morning, Mark Cantor. How are you?
I'm good. I'm dandelion this morning.
I loved when you said that to me.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know, but I was thinking, is he smoking them or smelling them?
I think it's like, for me, like a play on the word dandy.
Yeah.
But dandy is not, but dandy kind of refers like a 70s term, right? Refers to like a pretty boy. You know,
yes, it does.
Steely,
It does. Yes,
Steely
absolutely.
dance song.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was the dandy of something Omega or whatever.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
Whatever.
So you're feeling dandy today?
I feel good this morning.
That's awesome. Why?
You know, I had two good calls from families yesterday about interventions, which I really love. I love doing interventions. I love when there's action in my life. I'm very bad with downtime. And in fact, I was saying to somebody last night that when I was in commercial real estate, I used to say, I don't get paid for the deals. I get paid for the time in between the deals. Because when you're working on a deal or you're working on a case, it's exciting. You're moving and grooving. There's travel. There's excitement. There's crisis. I do that for free. It's the time between a case ending and the next case beginning is where the psychological torture lies, that not knowing when the next case is. And I think that's the hard part. That's what we get paid for. So,
do you think that's a financial thing or an adrenaline thing? Because I think you're a little bit like me. You're a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. You like that little dopamine hit.
I do, yeah.
Trying to do it in like a healthy kind of way, right?
Right.
And so, because I'm terrible at downtime too. I love to fill my schedule, even though I will complain about it.
Same. Yeah, I need structure, and I will, and I love when I have like a day of meetings, and then I will complain about that I have no time. But I rarely come out of a meeting with somebody, even if it's just a coffee or whatever, thinking like, oh, that was a waste of time. Or
isn't that so funny how we go with that?
Yeah,
that's amazing. And you haven't really talked too much about this. And one of the things that's interesting is we're going live today on TikTok, so people are actually watching this as we're going on.
Watching this.
If someone wants an intervention, where do they reach you?
So they can call me anytime. I sleep with my phone stapled to my head.
I will keep that in mind on the nights where I can't sleep.
Yeah, I just 202-390-2273. And my website is southfloridaintervention.com, singular intervention. And same for you. If somebody needs a world-renowned, outstanding therapist, where do they reach you?
They can reach me at my cell, which is 516-635-6186. I will tell you that after 8:30 at night, it's a little bit dicey if you're going to reach me.
I have noticed that you don't pick up the phone after.
Yeah, because I'm like in sleepy mode, but then I'm up at 4:35.
Yeah.
So that's how my circadian rhythm just works. So
what do you do at 4:30 in the morning?
I wake up, I have my breakfast, and this is
What do you have for breakfast?
Gluten-free toast with peanut butter and this plant-based butter, and then coffee, and then about 15 supplements I take.
Wow.
Yeah. You do a protein smoothie?
Sometimes if I'm kind of trying to move out, my protein smoothie in the morning is pretty much the same as my breakfast if I cook it. So the commonality is a cup of Greek yogurt, 3 or 4 strawberries. I've been switched to a plant-based peanut butter supplement because there's less fat. I'll put a raw egg in there.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then I use Isopure protein. It's really good, and then a water base, so it's really good. But if I'm cooking breakfast, I'll make 4 eggs. 3 of them are white, 1's whole. 3-4 strawberries, cup of yogurt, and maybe a smattering of the peanut butter powder that I just switched to.
I like that, a smattering.
Smattering. Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So in the morning, what I do is for about an hour to an hour and a half, checking my emails, I'm planning. I'm also watching YouTube videos. And I got into the habit of doing this, I don't know, a couple of years ago, maybe when I first moved to Florida, just to get my mindset straight.
Yeah.
So I watch certain people who I think have good content. I watch their style.
Like motivational stuff?
It depends. Sometimes I watch Joe Rogan. I watch a lot of Dave Ramsey because I do a lot of financial work and I'm learning about finances and investing and all of that.
Something I need to desperately learn about.
Yeah, we all do. It really should be something we're taught in school. And then there's this one that I am watching recently.
Absent that day.
I was absent.
I was cutting class that day.
And then I watched this guy recently. I started watching called Charisma on Command, and it's really interesting because that actually feeds into our topic for today, which is about having conversations and communication issues and dealing with people. Good segue, right? Dealing with people who maybe are narcissists or passive aggressive in their communication style, and how do you actually deal with it? So this guy, young guy, really personable, has this channel called Charisma on Command, and it's talking about, not just in this particular area, but just overall, how do you use your charisma, your body language to get the results that you want in your world? And usually a lot of the videos I watch are business oriented. I would love to get an MBA, but who has time? And I'm not sure I need a lot of the economics classes and things like that. I just want to learn how to run a business.
Yeah.
So there was a great video that I'm hoping that we can attach as a clip when this podcast drops. But it was an interview that this British journalist had done with Robert Downey Jr. Several years ago, I believe, when he was promoting, I think, one of the Avengers movies. And the interviewer was passive aggressive. He was, he was trying to get a rise out of Robert Downey Jr.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was amazing to see how he handled it and shut the guy down. And
shut him down or just let it pass?
Shut him down.
Yeah.
Shut him down. And so he discussed several steps for dealing with someone who's difficult this way, who's trying to catch you. And so, my thought was, okay, let's look at this. Because we talk about people pleasing, we talk about codependency, and a lot of times those issues have an impact on how we communicate with others.
Absolutely. And to that point, I find that if I start on a good foot, if I just slow myself down and can get that pause in between what somebody's saying or what I'm saying or my thought, and just think about it for a second, I can regulate myself and say,
Absolutely.
I'm not in danger here. There is just an opinion or whatever. It's fine. I can come. It's when I just go, I get into it. I'm immediately in a defensive position that I lose myself.
Absolutely. And that's what they were pointing out is that you could actually see in the video. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is amazing anyway. And I don't know if this is because he's done hundreds of interviews or if he's been through therapy or, if his agent, publicist, whatever taught him this. But you can actually see in the video where he's taking the breath and he's regulating his emotions because you could tell through his eye contact, right? He's gotten pissed.
So he really had to be conscious of what's going on here. He had to say to himself, I'm getting pissed. I need to calm down. I need to take a different tack. So it's funny, and I'm glad to hear that because he's only human, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about these in-depth interviews with major people, because as mortals, we look at them, we say, they've got whatever. So in my mind, Robert Downey Jr. He's a major star.
He's Iron Man.
He's
Come
Iron
on.
Man. Yeah. And he's rich, and he's good looking, and he's got everything one could ever want. does he say to himself, well, fuck this, I'm Robert Downey Jr. What do I care what this guy thinks? Or does, despite having all of that, he still has this very human reaction and says, I need to slow it. I need to calm down. I need to get myself here.
Because you could see in the video, the guy was provoking trigger points, bringing up things that Robert Downey Jr. had said in an interview. He couldn't even remember when it was. I think it was when he was first getting clean.
So he was pretty vulnerable.
It was a long time ago. Yeah. And he was just like, I mean, I have to tell you the steps that they said he went through because I thought it was so cool. So, I mean, number one, he held the eye contact. Mm-hmm. So he's not letting the guy like provoke him, or he's not looking away. This is a challenge.
He's not letting the other guy be the alpha. He's not keeping his eyes on the
Nope. Then he gave the interviewer the benefit of the doubt. He kind of reframed it and was like, oh, well, kind of trying to redirect the conversation just in case the interviewer was nervous and making a mistake and went someplace he shouldn't have. Then he sort of gave like a little bit of a warning shot. Like, I don't really know why we're talking about this, but, that was a long time ago, and I couldn't even remember what I answered, or I'm sure I would answer it differently today. So he was good. And then finally he called it out. Yeah. And he's like, so, like, what's going on here?
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
That he named it.
Yeah. Named it. And then he got up and he left.
Right.
Left the interviewer. And you could see, actually, gosh, I hope we can post this clip. I hope it's not a copyright thing. The cameraman looks at the interviewer like, what the hell did you just do? You just pissed off Iron Man.
Yeah. You're gonna get a rocket through the head.
Right.
And then did he go home and then grab Gwyneth Paltrow and... No.
He probably drowned his sorrows in his pool, in his mansion, whatever. I mean,
but he was sober,
But he was sober.
So let's hope he just went to the gym and called his sponsor and.
Yeah, but I think this is a really good point, especially when we're talking about addiction.
Yeah.
Because when I work in the facilities and I run groups, one of the things that I notice, and it's a question that I ask everybody, what are you feeling right now? 9 times out of 10, someone who is struggling with an addiction, with an eating disorder, has no concept.
Right. It's hard. I remember that when I was in treatment, my counselor would ask me, Bob would say to me, what's your feeling word? And I'd say like shit. And he'd say, like shit's not a feeling word. But it's interesting that you bring this up because this is like interventions. Mm-hmm. When I'm in an intervention, I'm trying to be that person, or I am that person that's maintaining, orchestrating. And if I've done my work correctly with the family, if I've prepared the family the right way, we've done everything we should, they're doing the heavy lifting. I'm there kind of just pointing and orchestrating and cueing and things like that. But there does come a point where the questions come back to me. And from the addict standpoint, and when I use the word addict, I mean anyone who's addicted, regardless of what it is, or engaged in, maladaptive behaviors. And their brain is completely in survival mode, fight and flight. They're in fight and flight at an intervention. And they're trying to think of every way they can to get out of this. How do I undo this? How do I get out of this? And they're going to start throwing things at you. And it's important to, especially in an intervention, when I'm being paid to do this, to remind myself this is not about me, it's about them. And I think sometimes I need to do a better job remembering how the person in the hot seat feels. The person how I felt when I was being called out. They're scared. In their mind, they're saying, what they're hearing is, I have one solution. And it's the drink, or it's the drug, or it's the gambling, or the sex, or the shopping, or whatever. And you want to take that away from me? What? How will I survive?
Right. I have no replacement.
I have no replacement. I have one coping mechanism, and you want to take that away from me. The truth is, and not to get into it now, we are going to give you something in return. We're going to fill it with, we're going to give you something better. If you just unclench your fist and let me take that out of your hand, I will give you something much greater that will be your coping mechanism. But it's a process, and you got to trust me. So I think it is interesting. And in an intervention, I really try to be very thoughtful about my answers, and not to say that once in a while I don't feel a little like, defensive.
Triggered?
I do.
Sure.
Triggered. You can be. And I've gone into interventions where people throw shit at me.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, I went to an intervention once in a hotel room in Denver with this guy and his mom, and he's like, starts calling me all kinds of names. You're faggot, get out of here, And
Wow.
it was like, and for some reason it didn't bother me at all. And it went and I knew we had a couple of days with this guy because he was in the hotel room. And my first thing was we get out of the room and I say to his mom, I said, it's interesting he thinks I'm gay. And she's like, oh, don't listen. I said, no, I'm not. He responded exactly the way I thought he would respond. But we had done our homework and we had taken all the stuff from his apartment, packed it up in his car, in his Subaru, and put the Subaru in storage. So we had everything in place. And I said, the next step is, I said to the mom, you need to leave. You need to go back to Palm Beach. And she said, right now? I said, soon. I said, you need to leave this hotel, because she'd been there a couple of days. I said, you need to leave here. You at least need to be gone. I need to be able to tell them you're gone and you're nowhere to be seen. And she did. She went to another hotel that night and the next morning flew home. And once she was gone, the kid was like, and I say kid, he was probably 33 years old or whatever. But then he was like, became more malleable. And I've had that experience a lot too with parents where they'll call me and they'll say, we talked to our kid about treatment and he ripped the TV off the wall and threw it at me. And he said XYZ, and parents will say, this is horrible. This is all going badly. And I'll say, no, I think it doesn't sound, I think you're okay. It sounds good to me. They're like, what are you talking about? But I recognize the signs of, they're just fighting it.
They're cornered.
They're cornered.
They're trying to break through that denial.
Yeah.
And they are fighting to hang on to it. So how do you stay regulated? Because that's the part that is the most important, whether you're dealing with someone who's trying to get under your skin, someone who's a narcissist, someone who is trying to provoke a reaction to see you lose your shit, right? What do you do? And I'll talk a little bit about what I've learned to do.
What you've done, what your process is. Well, I really subscribe to the philosophy that I don't know what's going to happen today. And I say that to the family. I don't know what's going to happen today. The other thing is I remind myself that I'm there for them. As human beings, we tend to think we're the center of attention. I'm not the center of attention. Whether this person goes to treatment or not today, and most do go. Very few don't go, and most do go at the intervention. But whether they go or not, I don't necessarily have to live with it. I'm not the parent that has to go back in there and then hold the boundaries for the next 5 days or a month until the kid says, fine, I'll go. So I let myself, so I think I don't have that. I do tend to pray before I go into an intervention in the shower in the morning. I mean, it's not a religious prayer or anything like that. I'll just say, dear God, please help me to be there for this family today. It is about them. It is about getting this person help. It is not about me. I'll use the set aside prayer. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but please help me to set aside everything I think I know about something, so I may have a new experience. And then I go in, and the toughest part of an intervention is when the person walks into the room and everyone's sitting in the living room. That 30 seconds or that minute when they're looking at everybody.
And it registers.
And it registers, yeah. And they know why we're there. They walk in and they say, who died? I say, nobody. They go, shit.
Now they know.
No,
It's about me.
Yeah, so nobody died. I'm me. I'm the one. You know.
But that's interesting, and I think there's a distinction there too. And again, this is what I teach in the facilities and teach with all of my patients, because people, I think, are generally really bad at being able to self-regulate. And not only that, you have to know where in your body the emotion is showing up. To know what the emotion is and how to self-regulate. So, and I think there's also the piece where it's, sure, if you're in a professional role, I think it's so much easier because you can stand behind your professional role. But what about, let's say, you're having a discussion with your wife and you're getting heated. Do you apply the same principles, or are you more likely to just be like, all right, screw it, we're going to town on this argument?
That's a good question, because the way I am and the way you are professionally is not necessarily the way you are with your partner or your kids or your parents. It's a whole other ball game.
And that's a myth, by the way, that I think we should, tell people right now. We are not perfect. We are human beings, and sometimes, at home,
we're having a
human experience.
Well, early on in my sobriety, I remember the last big fight my wife and I got into, like the fuck you, fuck you, but I'm punching the steering wheel. I think at about 6 months sober. And I get out of the car, I'm going to walk home, and I call my sponsor, and I unleash all that. I remember saying to him, I don't think I can do this, and the whole thing. And he says, and he listens, he's like, He says, had it ever occurred to you that you could listen to whatever she has to say, no matter how wrong you may think she is, and not respond and just listen and say, thank you for sharing that with me, and walk away? And I said, nope, that has never occurred to me in my life. But it has been one of the most powerful tools, is to remember that you don't have to respond. You can let the person talk. You can let them be wrong, or maybe they're right. And maybe in a day you go back to them and say, you know what, I've been thinking about what you said, and I think you're right. I owe you an apology. Or I thought about what you said and I respectfully disagree. Let's talk about it, but they're in a better place. Or the next day, nobody remembers what you're fighting about anyway.
Those are the best arguments, right?
Yeah, that's, most stuff is bullshit, right? I mean, I heard somebody say recently, if it's not going to be a problem in 5 years, it's not a problem now.
Sure.
So, but I think it's important to remember too, from the addiction or the person in treatment, whether they're there for mental illness, depression, anxiety, addiction, whatever reason they're there, that they are brand new. They have no coping skills. They had one coping skill, and that's now off the table. So they're in a very intense situation. And I remember when I was in treatment, we did what was called, during Family Week, we did what was called a fishbowl, where you kind of sit the way you and I are sitting now, and you do it with, your mom, dad, husband, wife, whomever is that most significant person in your life, your nuclear family. And they basically read their intervention letter to you. They let you have it. And I didn't take that very well.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's got to be difficult.
Well, the treatment center I was at, which was very good, but they made a mistake. They, for some reason, thought, just from the paperwork, that Julie was my mom and not my wife. And they put us in a group that was parents and kids.
Oh, that's interesting.
Instead of husbands and wives. And I think the reaction I had with the parents and kids as a witness was scary to them. But I think had we been in a group, properly in the group with husbands and wives, they would have been like, yeah, I'm pissed off, because parents and spouses have a very different reaction. I like to say that I have two kinds of clients. I have scared parents and pissed off wives. Parents are afraid their kid's going to die. And spouses are betrayed, and they're angry.
Fed up. They're done.
Pissed.
They're done.
They're pissed. Yeah. It's different. And no matter what our kids do, no matter how pissed we may be, we're never going to give up on them. Where in a marriage, you might say,
I'm done.
I'm done.
Enough.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to be able to recognize, and this was a process for me. There are some emotions that people are way more comfortable feeling than others.
Yeah.
So men are much more comfortable feeling anger than women are.
Yeah.
Men have a harder time with sadness and depression than women do. That obviously makes sense. So, I grew up in a household that was fear-based. Anger was one of those emotions that we didn't really talk about. It was under the surface with slamming cabinets. Like, I knew when people were mad, but we never actually talked about it.
Yeah.
So as I got older, and really I want to say in the last 5 years almost, I've really been very good at identifying where anger is in my body.
Tell me about that. What does that mean?
So I have to know exactly what emotion is going on inside of me and where it is to self-regulate.
Right.
So, and I tell people this all the time because they will say, I went from 0 to 60. There's no in between. Yes, there is. You just don't know. It's the same way someone wakes up and they're like, I don't know, all of a sudden I was at a bar and I have no idea how I got there.
Right. The car drove itself.
Yeah. So we have to slow it down.
You do. But to the person that has not developed those skills yet,
that's what it feels like.
It feels like the car did drive itself.
Absolutely.
You're there in a trance. There was nothing, and then there was fireworks.
Feels like we were starting a conversation, and then I was punching the wall. That's exactly how it feels. You go from one to the other. I
had a time before I got sober, where my hand was always swollen. I mean, I think it may still be like permanently bigger, but from punching walls, throwing mobile phones against the wall, breaking things, screaming, carrying on. Some of that you mature out of, hopefully. Hopefully, right. But you do develop the skills to. Yes. If you stop drinking and you do the work, and when I say drinking, I mean drinking. Well, all addiction, all maladaptive behavior. Yeah, whatever you want. Fill in the blank, and you do the work, those things will get better, I guarantee it. And you'll have skills. But it's like anything else. If you put me in a batting cage and shot the ball at me, I would say, he said, why aren't you swinging the bat? I'm like, that happened so fast. I couldn't even see the ball. But in time, the ball would slow down. And I would be able to see the ball coming and then be able to hit. But it would take a lot of time. I do have zero of that skill now. But if you stay in something and you practice it, you will learn to do it. Sure. And I think anger, and I do talk about this a lot with families, that emotions are like atrophied muscles. If I go to the gym and I just haven't done arm curls in 5 years, you got to work that. That 20-pound dumbbell feels heavy. Feels heavy, right? Yeah, right. So I learned, it takes a lot to get me angry. Takes a lot, but I learned that, especially, we've talked about this with narcissists, I know exactly when someone's trying to provoke me. I get a little bit of like fire in the pit of my stomach. That's my first sign. And I often think of it as, do you know that like at a fair where you have that thing where you hit it and it goes all the way up and it hits the bell? Yeah, the mallet. Yeah. So that's how it feels in my body. So I know if I have a little rumbling in my stomach, it's cool. I know like if I'm getting to the chest, I'm getting really provoked, and I know by the time it hits my head, if it hits my head, all bets are off. Yeah. And I know that that's when you want to stay away from me. I don't throw things, I don't do anything like that, but I'm very good with language, and when I use the right words, that gets somebody more than anything. You can be devastating. Yes. I think women are better at that than men. Probably. Men are very physical. Women are more verbal anyway. Yeah. So it became for me, and look, this is also a health thing. I don't want my blood pressure going sky high all the time. Right, which is why I wear my Awry ring. Because and then you feel hungover. Yeah, because you have all of those chemicals that now have to be reabsorbed into your body, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting. So being able to pay attention and to shut it down right away. So if I know a narcissist is provoking me, I'm usually thinking like, okay, what are they saying?
What's the underlying message, and how do I bring that message to the surface?
Yeah.
So, because what narcissists try to do in particular is they distract you because they want to provoke the reactions so that they can then say, see, you're crazy.
Right.
You're having this reaction.
Right.
So it's super important. Take note of this, people. Super important to stay calm.
Yeah.
And then second of all, what I like to do is comment on the process instead of the content, which Robert Downey Jr. did. He did an amazing job of that. What's going on here?
Yeah. What am I missing?
Right. Or I'll just say, well, I'm curious because we're kind of going off track. Let's get back to the original topic, which was X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And you'll see them get flustered because they really want to bring you to that crazy place, and you're not taking the bait.
Yeah.
And that's like the number one strategy, is to watch yourself in an interaction and watch how you take the bait. That you can control.
Yeah. You have to train yourself.
For sure.
And you have to train them to not treat you that way. Because I do believe that people treat you the way you train them to treat you.
It's all behaviorism.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
all behaviorism. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the number two thing is I'm a big believer in eye contact. Mm-hmm. Not in a challenging way. And there are certain people clinically, if you guys are clinical people out there, you don't look at certain people in the eye, paranoid people, things like that, because it freaks them out. But in general, people are understood and heard when you look at them in the eye. Mm-hmm. And our anxiety can really keep us from doing that. But I know I can see a lot when I look in someone's eyes. I can tell whether I can trust them or not, and I can tell what their mood is, and I can read them very well. Now, I don't know if that's because I grew up in a household, or I was bullied, so I became hypervigilant about reading danger signs all around me.
Yeah.
But that's something that I do, and I also believe that maintaining eye contact with someone allows them to trust you.
Yeah.
If you're shifty, there's a reason.
For me, it's when people take accountability. When they shift, they're not blaming you. They're taking accountability for some part of it, or they'll listen to what you have to say, or they're just engaged. But I grew up in a house where there was a lot of anger early, and I now recognize that as unresolved intergenerational trauma.
Absolutely. And we didn't know any of this.
No.
I mean, as you get older, and I think as you're a parent yourself and you make your own mistakes parenting, you kind of recognize, oh man, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
so, yeah.
Yeah. I've probably really yelled or maybe spanked Justine twice that I can remember. And I still will feel bad about those. I'll be like, oh no, why, feel so bad about it. Feel so much guilt about it, but yeah, no, there was anger. I had a lot of fear, and as when you grow up in a home with alcoholism or anger or fear or unsafe or sexual assault or any of those things, you become very adept at feeling what's safe and what's not safe, and going with inside yourself, and also blaming yourself. There's a great meme I saw. I still have it on my phone, and it's of a little boy, and he's got it's kind of like a brownish tint to the photo, like an old-timey photo in a way. And there's a tear coming down his eye, and it says, when you abuse him, he doesn't start to hate you. He starts to hate himself.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And I was like, yeah, that's true.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. I think the other thing that is difficult about communication is I think the mental health field, and I'll probably get a lot of flack for this, but I think the mental health field has not done a very good job of providing people with ways to actually engage in healthy communication. Mm-hmm. It sounds too therapy. I will never teach anyone an I statement. I think it's so fake. It's fake.
When you do, I feel.
Yeah, it's fake. Mm-hmm. It just sounds very contrived. Mm-hmm. Nobody speaks that way. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen it do to the other person is the other person will say, it sounds like you've been to your therapist too much.
Right. It sounds like you've lawyered up.
Yeah. It sounds awful. Yeah. And so I'm a big believer in let's just be direct, but kind.
Yeah.
So, hey, would you mind doing blah, blah, blah? Yeah. Instead of when you leave dishes in the sink, I feel sad or I feel dismissed. How about just saying, hey, would you mind just putting the dishes in the dishwasher?
Yeah, and the dishes and dishwashers is it's funny. It's a trigger for it's a topic in our house.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Why is that a topic in everyone's house? That is the thing. That's the chore I always had that I couldn't wait to get rid of when I got older, and then I got married, and that was my chore again.
Yeah,
how'd that happen?
I think it comes from your family of origin. In my family of origin as a child, leaving dishes in the sink or disrespecting property was not acceptable. That was a punishable offense. And I remember it being, how dare you disrespect what we've worked so hard to give you? I mean, and perhaps that is second generation.
Yeah, that's
war.
A generational kind of thing.
We grew up with nothing or very little. And we work so hard to give you, and you just treat it. And that's true. I don't disagree with that at all.
But it is a little manipulative and guilt-inducing and indirect communication.
It is.
Right? Which I think is common in that generation. I
think it's true. I think that the statement, the idea that we work so hard to give you and you're not, and by not taking care of that, you're showing it
and that's true.
Us. It is true. That level of communicating it that way is manipulative because the person violating that, they're not thinking that. That's not what's driving them.
No, they're not deliberately doing it. Maybe they're lazy. Maybe they forget. There's a lot of different reasons. And just give people sometimes the benefit of the doubt. So if you ever use an I statement with me, just know, like...
You're going to kick my ass.
Probably. I'm going to be like, Mark, that is just so contrived. Yeah. Like, come on, let's just talk about it.
But the thing to remember, again, from my standpoint, is you don't have to take every conversation you're invited to. You don't have to respond to every email you get. You don't, and I think that's very powerful.
Silence is golden. It says a lot.
And so if somebody sends me a text or an email and it activates me right away, and I can still get activated by certain people, and they send me a text or the I need to talk to you, and I right away am going into
fight or flight, right?
Fight or flight. And the answer is you don't necessarily have to respond to them.
That's what I've learned too, because when I get up early in the morning, I find that my defenses are down, and I am much more likely when I read an email to respond to it right away without thinking. And so I've gotten much better at that.
Yeah, and I at the end of the day, I think why that is those texts, those conversations, those phone calls are confirming what you most fear about yourself. See, I am a bad person. Mm-hmm. I am disappointing. Mm. And when I first got married, I didn't have any of these skills. I had some, but being in a new marriage will make you forget your skill. I mean, it's a whole new life. I mean, you're sharing space. It's not just about you. You can't just walk out the door. You have responsibility, accountability. And, so sometimes we'd get into a fight and I would take feedback as you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. And that was hard for me because, well, it's for being honest, you're confirming what I already know. I am a bad person. And that's shame, right? Because shame and guilt is I feel bad for what I did. And I never felt bad for what I did. I felt bad for who I am.
That's why sometimes I'll tell people a little trick that I do. I don't open mail on Friday, any mail, right, from the post office. And sometimes if I think that there's an email that's going to get me going, I may wait a couple days to open it because I know that I'm fearful. I know that like something might be coming, and I got to work on myself for a couple days before I feel ready to open the email.
And then typically you open that email, is it as bad as you thought, or is it?
It's usually not as bad as I thought, or if it is something that I feel in a better position to be able to respond to it without firing off something that may sound offensive.
Typically, in the worst case scenario, if we're lucky, if we think about it, the emails is the letter or the email, the whatever the communication says, you owe money. That's a big one. You were some blame or something like that, or you offended, or you. But if we think about it, if the worst case scenario is you owe money, it brings fear, but it's not so bad. Neither of us have ever been hungry and homeless.
No.
I mean, I've been hungry. I've been, it's like the difference between poverty and being broke. Being in poverty is a chronic disease that some families go through for generations. And hopefully someone breaks it with education and income and stuff. I've never had that. I don't think you've ever had that. What we're experiencing is fear of financial insecurity. My credit card's going to get declined at Whole Foods. And that has happened.
I've been broke.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've been broke.
Yeah.
After my divorce, I've been broke where I wasn't sure, like, am I going to be able to make the rent? Now, I knew I had resources where I could figure it out.
Right.
But you immediately go into that fear place.
You do.
And I think as you're kind of saying, maybe nothing is really that bad.
It's not that bad.
It's not that bad. And if you reframe it, that will calm you down.
Yeah. Nobody is going to let you be hungry and homeless.
No.
Right. And thank God. And if the letter says something really bad, it's probably not your fault. It's probably
that's a good point too.
It's probably
is if someone else is firing off some crazy email to you, that's a reflection on them and not you. It's
not a call from the oncologist on a Tuesday afternoon.
Listen, a perspective is everything. And I think that's important for people to recognize too, that really, and I often use this, I don't know if it's a skill, but I often use this. Like when I'm 85 years old, is this going to matter?
No.
Like really, like when we're
no.
dancing to the 80s music in the home, right? Like, and Julie's there and we're all doing the electric slide. Is it really going to matter?
No, it doesn't. And I can't think of anything, thank God, that hasn't passed. That any news, and eventually, look, I mean, this is life, and eventually the phone's going to ring at 3:00 in the morning, and it's going to be someone saying so and so's gone, and but as long as that's a person that was born before you, if you know what I mean, as long as it's a parent or an aunt and uncle and grandparent, it's not a child, then fine. That's life. That's life.
The natural progression of how things go. It's a natural progression
of life, and those things are going to happen. And the point about too the email, the we need to talk email. If someone's going to fire you, dump you, accuse, they're going to do that anyway. There's nothing you can do about it.
Right. Although I think and wrapping up on this note, I sometimes think, hey, I wish I had the balls to really just tell them what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've always wanted to be that guy that could walk into a room and motherfucker everybody and be like, I'm right and that's it, and not even, but I'm not. I care too much about what other people think. I don't want to hurt people. But there is a way to command the respect to, in essence, shut it down.
Charisma. That's what that channel's talking about.
Without
right.
Yeah, without being a dick.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to be a dick.
And that's what Robert Downey Jr. did. Yeah. Like he shut it down without being a dick.
Yeah.
Which I love. I think that's a great skill. So take it away, Mark. Where can everyone find us?
Wow, this was fun. I can't believe our time already. Yeah. This was great. I love this conversation and could just continue on and on. So I think next time we're welcoming Dr. Kate Edwards, who's an attachment expert.
Oh, that's going to be really good.
Fascinating.
That's going to be really
good. I was listening to her give a presentation to a family we were working with, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the keys. This attachment stuff is the answer to my question, where were you when I was a kid? This was exactly what's going on. That whole fear of I'm going to be ejected from my community and
I'm bad. Like people are going to reject me, toss me out. There's something wrong with me.
And she explains, and I don't want to steal any thunder, but she explains that fear of being ejected from your community in the human mind equates to I could die. Oh, because that's how
it feels.
That's how we're genetically programmed.
Ooh, like I can't wait.
We're genetically programmed to procreate and to eat and to seek shelter. We are genetically programmed to attach to community. And maybe not today, but in years past, if you were ejected from your community, it meant you're probably going to die. And so that's why when you're being rejected, you feel so...
Like an evolutionary thing.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
You feel like I must win this battle.
Cool.
And that is the basis of that is the beginning of the codependency, the people pleasing, and all that stuff.
Oh, I can't wait! Can't wait for that, and people are going to want to tune in to that one also. So
I'm excited for that.
Don't forget, everybody. You can check out all of our content on Apple, Spotify. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating because that's how the magic happens.
That's
and
right.
all of the complete videos are also on YouTube on @LauraEllick. That's where I've put all the videos. So if you ever want to watch yourself, that's where it is.
And my social media help is Help for Addiction. So if you want to see more of us, follow, leave a 5-star rating. And if you never want to see us again, still leave a 5-star rating and follow and like.
And maybe you'll learn to like us.
Maybe you'll learn to like us.
I think we have some good things to say.
We're likable.
We're likable. So everyone have a great day from Mark Cantor and Dr. Laura Ellick. Enjoy.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks. Bye-bye.